Okay, so how do you do your homework and take your quiz? Well, we're going to use section 1.2, which is the first section that we need to cover as our intro to our homework assignment and our quiz. And so what I'd like to do is show you how to do that by first pulling up the assignment. So as you can see, here's your home page. One way to get to your assignment is to go to the homework and test manager. Another way is to go to assignments. They've changed kind of like the way this is laid out. Personally, I think the previous way was a little bit better, if you remember it, but it doesn't matter. Another way is to come off here to the side where it says assignments and click assignments. Now, what you guys are going to notice is that several things are past due. This is because they just updated the book and dumped a whole bunch of stuff in here that wasn't really relevant. And at this point, I do want to throw out that you should never look at your grade on MyLabs Plus here, this particular part here, as your reference for how you're doing in the class. In Canvas, remember Canvas is what took us here, right? In Canvas, there's an area for gradebook. That's where you want to pay attention to your grade. So even though this says past due, blah, 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 don't stress it. I'm going to get that cleaned up eventually. What's more important is that you do what we say you need to do, okay? If you look at what's my grade in MyLabs Plus, you're gonna get either too excited or too stressed out. Neither of which is really necessary. So what's important is you do your homework and your quizzes here. That's all that matters. Homework and quizzes here. Outside of this program is where you get your grades and all that. So if you scroll down, you can see all this stuff that has nothing to do with section 1.2. You can see that until we get to, look at that. There's section 1.2. There's the homework and there's the quiz. Does that make sense? Okay? There's the homework, there's the quiz, and look, here's the due date. For you guys, my Monday, Wednesday class, we meet at 9:30 every Monday, Wednesday. I believe the 27th is this coming Monday. At least I looked at it, and it should be. If not, I can fix that. But Monday the 27th, 9:30. At 9:30, everything's going to lock. So you're not going to be able to access it. Well, look, today's Wednesday. We're going to try to get through most of the homework. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You should be able to get through that. Okay? All right? So what you'll do is, to do the homework, you'll click on the assignment. So we're looking at 1.2. We can't take the quiz yet because we have to complete 75% of the homework. Now, I didn't set the lock on that, so technically if you click the quiz right now, you can probably take it. But whatever, you get the idea. Eventually, by the time we get to the middle of the semester, I won't even lock the quiz because you guys will know the routine. So here it is. There's the assignment. It has 18 questions. We're going to go and start out at question number 1. Okay? So, as you can see here, 1.2, estimation, graphs, and mathematical models. And here we go. So, the first thing that we need to do is we need to know how to round. And so, with estimation, graphs, and math models, rounding is an important skill. It says, according to a survey, 65,263,785 people can speak a language other than their native language. Round this number to the nearest, and there are multiple parts to this problem. So, as a prerequisite to this course, you should know how to round. If for some reason you don't know how to round, you can look up a quick video on YouTube on rounding, but I really don't want to spend 10-15 minutes teaching how to round, especially since a video will probably do a lot better job than even me. So if you for some reason don't recall how to round, look up a video on YouTube. You can talk to me after class. I'll be happy to help you, but in class, I think most of you guys are good with this. So part A says round to the nearest 100. Well, a quick intro to rounding. This is the ones place, right? Tens, hundreds. This is the 100 place. So if I want to round to the nearest 100, I first need to identify what place I'm rounding to. Then I look directly to the right of it. Directly to the right is an 8. If the number directly to the right is 5 or larger, then the number I'm rounding will go up. If that number is 4 or less, then this number that I'm rounding will stay the same. Okay? Because that's an 8, it means that my 7 is going to bump up. And so my answer is going to be 65,263,800. Once you've rounded that place, then everything to the right of it goes to 0. Does that make sense? Okay? Any questions about that? And then, of course, you can check your work. It's going to tell you whether you did a good job, or if you made a mistake and should try it again. Let's take a look at the next one. Next problem says to use the same number, but we want to round it to the nearest 1,000. Well, let's, again, have a quick review of places. So here's the ones place, the 5 is in the ones place, the 8 is in the tens place, the 7 is in the hundreds place, the 3 is in the thousands place. That's the place we're rounding to. And so we now need to move directly to the right and look at the 7. If the number directly to the right is 5 or larger, then our number that we're rounding to is going to go up by 1. If it's 4 or less, that number that we're rounding to is going to remain the same. Because that's a 7, obviously that 3 is going to go up by 1. And so our answer should be 264,000. And remember that whatever place you're rounding to, once you've done the rounding, everything to the right of it goes to 0. Any questions about that at all? Hope you guys are working ahead of me if you were able to access the assignment. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Round to the nearest 10,000. So again, let's do a quick little review of places. The 5 is in the ones, 8 is in the tens, 7 is in the hundreds, 3 is in the thousands, 6 is in the 10,000s. So that 6 is in the 10,000s place. We're going to look at the number directly to the right of it to determine whether we're going to round the 6 up or keep it the same. That number is 4 or less. Because that's a 3, it means that 6 is going to stay the same, and everything else will still go to 0 to the right of it. So whether or not you round the number up or down, that place, everything to the right of it, will go to 0. Does that make sense? Okay? Yes?
I'm sure I'll figure this out on my own, but like, whenever you're putting in answers, do you have to like...
Put the commas? No.
Is it going to crucify you?
No, it's not. I just did it there to help you guys see it a little bit better.
Okay.
But if you put it in without, which we can do on the next one right here, let's put it in without and see what happens. It's not going to. It's sort of picky sometimes, but in something like this, I don't think it is. It can be without the commas. So with that said, nearest 100,000s, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. The 2 is in the 100,000s place. The 6 is in the place directly to the right of it. Because that 6 is 5 or larger, that 2 is going to become 3, and everything to the right of it is going to be going to 0. So that's 65, 3, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now you can see why I personally put the commas in for you guys, because even for me, this is a lot harder to see than just taking the time to drop a comma in, but it should be no problem. There we go. Does that make sense? Okay, and this is a perfect example of me. I'm not going to go any further on that. I've just done 4 rounding problems for you, right? So this is an example of where I think I've done enough. Let's move on to the next problem, okay? So you guys can complete that problem on your own time, or you might have already completed it while I was talking. And so that's a typical class. If I feel like I've hit the topic, I have pretty good comprehension, then I'm going to roll on to the next one. Another thing I'll do is that depending on the topic, I may pause, walk around the class, help you guys out, answer questions. But something like this where I think it's a prerequisite item, I think most of you guys are probably good, so I'm not going to spend too much time trying to ensure comprehension. All right, now it goes the other direction. So the previous problem was dealing with the whole number part of a number. This deals with the decimal part of a number. This happens to be a little bit more tricky for students to deal with. Everybody has a little bit more problem with, not everybody, but people tend to have a little bit more problem with decimals. And so, but it's still prerequisite material. So if for some reason you are having issues rounding decimals, pull up a quick YouTube video. They'll spend 10, 15, 20 minutes explaining it. You'll walk away from that video feeling a lot better, okay? So here we go, round to the nearest given place. So same concept, 5 or larger, 4 or less, but you have to know how to read places for decimals now. Instead of reading to the left, we need to read to the right. Let's take a look. It asks us to round this number to the nearest thousandths place. Well, as a quick review, decimals. This first 9 is not a ones place. Decimals are a tad different because unlike whole numbers, this is the ones place, but directly opposite of that is not the ones place. Decimals start at the tenths place. If you didn't know that, now you know, or refresh it, watch a video, they'll keep reiterating that. So this first 9 is in the tenths place, the second 9 is in the hundredths place, and now things start to sound the same as the other way. Whereas here, when we're dealing with whole numbers, the very first one is the ones. But that's not the case with decimals. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that too is where we're looking to round to. Again, when we're rounding with decimals, we still look directly to the right to help us determine how we're going to round. If the number directly to the right is 4 or less, we keep it the same. If it's 5 or larger, we round up by 1. Because that's a 0, that 2 is going to stay the same, and everything to the right of it is going to be a 0. Let's take a look at how to enter that. 1.992. Now, you have a couple options. With decimals, you can either drop the remaining zeros altogether, not even include them, because with decimals, whether I type 1.992 or 1.99200, it's the same thing. However, if I was dealing with whole numbers and I had 992 versus 99,200, are those the same? No. So when you're dealing with decimals, if you want to include those zeros, that's fine, because this versus this is saying the same thing. But if you're dealing with whole numbers and you drop off the decimal point or you drop off the zeros leading up to there, you're saying something completely different. 992 versus 99,200, two totally different quantities. Does that make sense? Okay, very important you get that. So doesn't matter what you do, I think it's still going to take that answer. It does, right? What's the preferable thing to do? In decimals, you would drop off those zeros. It looks better and it says the same thing. It's not redundant. This, whole numbers, don't do that. Okay? Questions about what we just did there? Hopefully you're working ahead of me if you have access to it. Let's take a look at another one of these decimal problems. So it gives us round the number to the nearest 100,000. So let's go do a quick review on decimal places again. Here we go. Is this the ones place? No, it's not. There is no ones place when you're rounding decimals. It starts at the tenths place. Tenths, then the nomenclature stays the same. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths. That's what we're looking for. So this 2 is in the position that we're looking to round. Tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, perfect. What do we look? Directly to the right. So aside from this first position changing to start at tenths, everything else afterwards is relatively the same. So if that number is 4 or less, we keep the 2 the same. If it's 5 or larger, we bump the 2 up by 1. And of course, since that's a 3, we're going to leave that 2 alone. And then you can decide how you want to enter that. 1.31532. I'm going to put it in without the zeros. And so there it is. So if you wanted to throw in the extra zeros, you certainly could have, but is it necessary? Not really. And this is a little bit cleaner. Again, don't ever do that with whole numbers. Any questions about what we've done so far? Doing okay? All right. Now, the pace I'm going at right now is a lot faster. Like I'm talking a lot faster because we had a lot to go through today. On a typical day, my pace will be half the speed of what we're going at. But because 1, I'm trying to knock out 1.2, and 2, a lot of this is review for many of you, and 3, we had so much to get through, I'm moving a little bit faster, okay? All right, so let's take a look at this. It says, obtain an estimate for the following computation by rounding the numbers so that the resulting arithmetic can easily be performed by hand or in your head. Then use a calculator, you get your scientific calculator, to perform the computation. How reasonable is your estimate when compared to the actual answer? And so if we scroll down just a tad, we can see what they're trying to get us to do. 7.54 plus 2.33 plus 17.4. Round it so that you can easily do it by hand or in your head. Well, what is this? I would probably go whole numbers, right? 8, right? 2, right? 17. How did I get those? 5 makes this an 8. 3 keeps this the same. 4 keeps this the same. Does that make sense, guys? So what did I use? I used the first decimal place, the 10th place, to round the ones place in all of these numbers. Treat it like it's money, right? $7.54, $2.33, and so on. Now I can do this more in my head. 8 and 2 is 10. 10 and 17 is 27. So that's a pretty easy computation. And of course, the beautiful thing about this class is you can use a calculator. Unlike other classes, you can't really do that. So this class, you can use a calculator all the way through. And if for some reason that calculation was still a little bit tricky for you, go for it. Go use a calculator. Now, the second half of this question is they want you to find the actual sum. Now, because you can use a calculator, I am not going to show you how to add decimals. I'm not going to go through the long process of stacking them and showing you how to add decimals. Why? Because there's no point. Because the bottom line is you guys are going to end up using your calculator anyways, which is more efficient. So you should be able to put in your calculator 7.54 plus 2.33 plus 17.41 to get the actual sum. Notice how it doesn't say round at all. So whatever that dumps out after adding them, that's going to go there. I don't have my calculator because my phone's recording. 28.28. 28.28. Let's see here. 5433 is 8. Okay, perfect. So there you go. You got some numbers. Some people did in their head. Love it. I'm not going to do it. You guys get the idea. So this one is the same way, except it's subtraction. So I'm not going to do it. Does that make sense, guys? You can do an estimate. You're going to have 2 parts to these questions, an estimate and an exact. Typically, you're going to estimate to the nearest ones place, right? 32 and 10. 32 minus 10, 22. I just did that in my head because it wasn't too bad. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. And then the actual difference, pull your calculator, knock it out, done. All right, next. Next one is multiplication. So what would I do here? 29.83 is like 30. 5.5 is like 6. 30 times 6 is about 180. And then you can go do the exact on that. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Again, I'm just kind of rolling through these because a lot of this section is relatively easy. What's this? 83.86 divided by 5.9. I would say that's like 84. And 6. 84 divided by 6 is 14. So there's the estimate, and then you can put your calculator and get the actual. Remember, all these problems so far that we've done are 2-part problems, but I'm not doing part 2 because my calculator is recording, and you guys can do it. All right? Okay. So the next thing they do is they essentially have you do the same thing, but they put it into context. So what they do is they give you like a grocery list, and then they say, okay, well, go estimate the cost of your groceries by rounding to whatever. So they say type a whole number. So what do you think you should do? Round these to the dollar, right? And then add them all up. Does that make sense, guys? And always with section 1.2, it's a pretty straightforward section, okay? The same thing is true for this next one. And let's do this one, okay? Let's do this one together. We're going to estimate this, and then we'll find the exact. A full-time employee who works 40 hours per week earns $26.50 per hour. Estimate that person's annual income. So let's do this one together, and then what time is it? Perfect. This will be our last question, and you guys will be prepared to do your homework, okay? Let's do this question together, and then we'll call it a day. I'll show you how to take your quiz, and then we'll get out of here. Thanks for hanging in there. So, 40 hours a week, $26.50 per hour. Round 52 weeks to what? 50. So what are we doing? Estimation. We're going to work about 50 weeks a year. How many hours do we work a week? 40 hours a week. And how do we want to estimate 26.50? 27 maybe? Just play with it and see what it likes, right? So maybe 27, it says round to the nearest 1,000. We'll see at the end. So, and this is your salary, right? What is this? This is going to be 2,000. Somebody knock this out on a calculator for me. I could do it, but it'd be a lot easier if you guys do it for me. 36,000, 35,000 maybe? No. 30?
2,000.
54,000.
54,000. Way off. There you go. Now, it says round to the nearest 1,000. So I would round it down to 50,000. Let's see if this works. If not, this number might have to be a little bit lower. But let's see if this works. 50,000. Didn't like that. Round the hourly wage to the nearest dollar. Well, it looks like you did it right.
I
So,
probably didn't like your rounding of the weeks.
well, it said to round to the nearest to 50 weeks, 40 hours, 27. Is this exactly what we got? Is that 50 times 40 times 27?
Yes.
Round to the nearest 1,000 as needed. Oh, the nearest 1,000. What am I doing? I just round to the nearest 10,000. Did you guys catch that? I literally just rounded to the nearest 10,000. That's why it's wrong. Good lesson. That's the thousandth place, right? So if I'm rounding to the nearest 1,000, that's what matters. Does that make sense, guys? And then if you want the exact, then you would do the exact number. Now, hold on one moment before you pack up. Let me show you how to take your quiz, because what do you got to do before the next class?
Take the quiz.
Take the quiz. So once you finish your homework, you need to take the quiz. If you go back to assignments, scroll down, there's the quiz right there, and you can take the quiz. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Do you need to take the quiz before we come to the next class? Yes. Please make sure you do that. Okay, awesome. Good job, guys.